Thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. ATEX Resources CEO Ben Pullinger is here to give us an update on Phase 4 drilling. With me, I have my colleague Magda, who's going to help with some of the Q&A, if there is any at the end. I think this session will mostly just be an update. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom. And as always, this presentation will contain forward-looking statements. If you'd like to know more about those, you can find them on the company's presentation on their website. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Ben. Ben, congratulations on the new role and the recent results.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you guys again for having us on this. It's always great to be here and give you guys an update and talk about all of the exciting things that we've been up to over the last few months. I think it's fair to say every phase of drilling that we've executed on this project, from phase 2, where we put out hole 17, which is 1,178 meters of spectacular mineralization, with that 500 meters at just over %, which kind of anchored everything we did going forward, leading into phase 3, where we really grew that mineralized footprint to where we put out that resource in September last year with that 1.4 billion tons, and now advancing that into phase 4 has just been a kind of a spectacular run. And it's a great time to sit back and kind of just reflect on what we've done in phase 4 as we look forward to wrapping up the program here. We have 2 partial holes still that we want to get out to the market, and just really recap on what's been a pretty spectacular and very successful program that included delivering some of the highest grade results that we've seen on the project to date. And I think most excitingly, what we'll talk about today is really just painting the picture for 2 things. One, scalability, seeing the high grade kind of roughly 1% core kind of growing from the south towards the north, and then optionality, where we see hole 26 returning at 68 meters of 2.02%, and potentially giving us a look at something that might be a smaller mine up above that has the ability to really pay for something much bigger and be the starter. So very exciting year for us. So just for the audience, just to quickly recap here, this is we own 49% of the project. Baked into our capital structure right now, we have just under $9 million Canadian warrants, which will expire next year. That will probably pay for that payment to get us to 100%. We have one more payment to make to go to 100% ownership, and we're looking very good there. All the exploration commitments and all the other kind of things around that have been satisfied. So it's really just that one more payment that gets us to 100%. And we're just wrapping up and have recently finished that phase 4 campaign. And as I mentioned before, we just have two partial results to add to the narrative to put out to keep an eye out for that. In terms of what ATEX is as a whole and what we deliver, this slide does a very good job of really just summing that up. Every hole that we've drilled into this project to date has returned in the order and the magnitude of 1,000 meters of continuous mineralization. You'll see it on the slide later on, where we show just how continuous and silky smooth the grade distribution of this project are. Once you get into that kind of greater than 0.3 copper mineralization, you don't get out of it. All of our holes pretty much bottom in mineralization. All of our holes return 1,000 meters of greater than 0.4, greater than 0.3 copper mineralization. And most importantly, we haven't tested the extent of the system yet. Even though we've reorganized the geology a little bit with what we've seen in phase 4 and shown more of that continuity of that higher grade and bulked out the kind of granite diorite portion of the resource, we still haven't hit the extent of the system. It remains open in all directions. And last year, very significantly, we put out that 1.4 billion tons of mineralization at a grade of 0.67. Important here to realize that 0.67, which is copper equivalent grade, was calculated using $3.15 copper, $1,800 gold, and 90% recovery for copper, 70% for gold. We subsequently announced in October last year the results of our first metallurgical test work program, which achieved 95% recovery for copper and 94% recovery for gold. So already showing an improvement on what we had in that resource model. For those that need a refresher, this is where we sit, really right within the spine of the Andes, we call the Porphyry superhighway. This is where 60% of the world's copper comes from. And again, probably the best place to be going forward in terms of where you want to be permitting, building, and operating a new world-class asset. And we think Valeriano is really on the way to be there, If you look at the bottom right-hand side of the image here, you kind of get a snapshot of not just us, but the other projects in this area. This is an incredibly well-endowed area in terms of copper mineralization. If you look at from Nueva Union down to Valeriano, that's about 50 to 60 kilometers away from each other. You're sitting at over 10 billion tons of copper resource just waiting to come online. You can also see we talk about our friends Costa del Fuego down there, Hot Chile, another interesting project. But what's really interesting about this district is in a world and an environment in which we see the Chilean government, who initially had taken a certain stance on permitting, now coming out and tabling a bill in which they want to see the permitting times for new projects in Chile half. They talk about infrastructure and their willingness to work on infrastructure as long as it's not single solution. They want to see collaboration. And then we look at what our friends Hot Chile are doing in terms of developing or permitting the easement for a pipeline that gets desalinated water to Vallenar, working on a desalination plant, and it's something that might ultimately be a water solution to this district. It really feels like the stars are aligning for projects like Valeriano, which on a standalone basis just looks better and better. But I think when you consider that Nueva Union had $1.28 billion in years of permitting in their PFS for water infrastructure and for permitting, if that shortens, if the infrastructure arrives, it really makes these projects all a lot more valuable, and it makes them a lot more imminent. And obviously that means our ability to move from geological curiosity to projects and to growing concern with a growing resource in 3 years is certainly an achievement in this in the right time, right place, right commodity. Here's a nice little lay of the land and some interesting updates here as well. And not only have we drilled another 15,000 meters on top of what you see there, the 22,000 meters that went into that last resource. And again, just to reiterate and why that resource came out so well, it's really when you're drilling holes 200 meters apart, and those holes have 1,000 meters of vertical continuity of grade between them, it really bulks that. It talks to the quality and that grade distribution within this deposit. What's really interesting here on the left-hand side of this the graphic here is when you look at the north and you see Codelco, who really haven't done a lot of exploring in the last 20 years, who are now coming out of their nest, so to speak, joining the exploration fray and drilling 100 meters to the north of one of our properties up there, following up on something. It's really interesting. You now have Codelco, Antofagasta, and the old ATEX all drilling across this area. We think that if you fast forward 10 years into the future here and you come back and you look at what this is, you see a lot more reward for exploration dollars. We see the continual confirmation that this is a cluster and it's going to continue to get bigger. And look at the quality of the players that are in this area. We think this is really the most exciting place to be exploring for copper right now, especially because it's all within Chile. Mineralization is great. It's very amenable to flotation and to current processing techniques. And I think the fact that these projects are potentially underground mineable will bode very well for the future as well. It uses less water, smaller footprint. We're very, very excited with what we're seeing in terms of the development of this district and how the Valeriano project is coming together. And again, when you look at the scale of this, from El Encierro to the north of us to the center of Valeriano, that's 5 to 6 kilometers between these two projects. They are the same system, and I think as both of these projects continue to explore, more of these will be found. And there's already 5 billion tons of contained mineralization between these two. So really continuing to get bigger and better as more exploration dollars get spent here. In terms of just a recap on that September 2023 resource, it really is a copper resource. It has the balance that you want to see there, 70% copper, 15.5 billion pounds of copper with almost 10 million ounces of gold. And that really came around. And this is really an important point as we talk about the evolution of where we were at this snapshot in time for this model to where we've gone in phase 4. You can see there on the top right of your screen, the images with the three fingers. It was that central finger was really the area. You can see there's a lot of drilling in there. That central finger of that, what's called EP, early porphyry there, that was the initial focus for the company. And that was really about drilling out that 200 million tons at just under 1% copper equivalent and showing that this has the economic engine. That's what we consider the payback core that can pay back the capital that's required to build out this bigger system. When you look at that 1.4 billion ton resource, just in terms of kind of to throw some numbers out there at you, if you look at a small, medium-sized block cave like Red Chris, for example, that's 10 million tons per annum. So that would mean you can pay it back hopefully in under 8 years, and then still have 140-year life of mine on the back of this. If you want to build something a little bit more substantial, call a medium to larger size block cave, you're looking at something in the order of 20 million tons per annum. That still gives you a 70-year life of mine. And now with the work that we've done in phase 4, we think we can show improvement on that as we build to a resource update for next year, and that optionality of something higher grade sitting on top, which is tantalizing considering we hit it in that last hole and could represent something that could really pay for all the rest of this, provided we can go out in phase 5 and follow up on that. And it's a very exciting development for the company. In terms of how this kind of sits relative to the topography, it really does have this geographical advantage in that mineralization starts 200 meters below surface. Just below that, you can see where hole 26 mineralization is. And again, us being able to push the envelope there and grow tons and put some dimensions around that in phase 5 gives us supreme optionality in terms of how this gets developed and funded over time. And then you can see the early porphyry there in pink, kind of growing to the east and the west, open in both directions, and getting closer to the valleys. The valleys, which sit about 500 meters below where we drill from on average, are where we could access this from, ramp down, get underneath, put in your infrastructure. And one of the things that really has happened through phase 4, if you go back, look at phase 3, we had the three fingers of that early porphyry, and now we're looking at something that's come together and is a more massive unit. It means it's simpler from a geotechnical perspective. It's easier to model. Really what we're doing in a world in which everybody wants something smarter, we're making this deposit dumber and easier. And we think that really bodes well for future kind of development and study as we advance this project and de-risk it through the next few milestones. Again, just a little reminder of how well the mineralization here can be recovered as well. We really do have best-in-class metallurgical recoveries when you look at this. 95% for copper, 94% on gold with the use of flotation and leaching, amenable to SAG and ball milling, and producing a concentrate that is incredibly marketable and can really go anywhere in the world. 31% copper, 12 grams per ton gold, zero deleterious elements, zero penalties. It's just a very, very clean system. And that really comes down to the fact that this granodiorite core, like the what we call the early porphyry or the mineralized intrusive, has intruded into this rhyolite. You've got epigranular chalcopyrite distributed around that porphyry and within it, as far as the eye can see, a little bornite in there as well, contributing to those higher grades. And again, we still haven't seen the edges of that system. We're currently just getting ramped up on our next phase of metallurgy, using core from the phase 4 and phase 3 programs to go and study more of the variability to extend the envelope in which we've studied this from a metallurgical perspective. And obviously we're kicking off those studies that will ultimately form part of a PEA that we'd like to put to the market before the end of 2025. Now, really, like the best summary for what we've done this year. If you look at this image, it's a bit hard to see. Hopefully, you can see my hand as I move around here. At the end of phase 3, we started with these three fingers of the early porphyry. Here was the high-grade trend. You can see the pinks and purples and reds here, denoting grades over 0.8 copper equivalent and within up to 1%. You can see how hole 26 sits right on the top of this, and this corridor remains open to the north and south. Hole 16A was a spectacular hole for us, 852 meters at 0.82% copper equivalent, and within that, 114 meters at 1.42%, showing that high-grade core has more of this northwest orientation to it and sits within what we now consider an envelope that we've shown that we have early porphyry mineralized intrusive all the way through of 1.2 kilometers by a width of about 500 to 600 meters and about 700 meters vertically, giving us kind of like a rough ballpark of 1 billion tons to shoot for in terms of just the intrusive component. And then we see 2 to 3 tons per ton of that in the wall rock as well, just showing that the system continues to get bigger. Just to put that in terms of a direct comparative, like conceptually, when we put out the 2023 resource, we had about 300 million tons between these 3 fingers of intrusive. We're now shooting for, with more drilling that we'll do in phase 5, a conceptual target that's closer to 1 billion. Just that's mathematical. Just taking those measurements and working through the average density for that. And then obviously, every time we drill this, we see that greater than 0.3 mineralization out to 700 meters away from that. And now on top of that, you have on top of that porphyry body in the kind of the breccias and mineralized wall rock above, we have that 68 meters at 2.02%. And that again, those copper equivalent numbers are calculated using the resource assumptions, the 90% and 70%. If you plug in our 95% for copper and 94% for gold into that, you actually get closer to 100 meters of 2.02 or 2%, which when you think about adding some dimensions to that starts to scale up very quickly and represents something, a new way of thinking about this deposit, a new way of thinking about how it might be developed, and optionality in terms of how this might be financed later down the road in terms of if you can build something smaller that pays for something bigger. So just to if I haven't said it enough, just to reiterate, phase 4 has continued to be transformative on the back of 2 other transformative drill programs. And it's not often that you see something that continues to get better every time you drill it. This is certainly the case, and we still haven't hit the edges of the system, which I think really speaks to the underlying quality of this asset as we move forward. Again, I love this image because it does a couple of things. One, it shows that, without sounding like an infomercial, but wait, there's more. We've only tested 1.2 kilometers along strike, of which you can see the vertical continuity down each hole. You can see the high-grade core starting to open up in here, open in this direction at the back. Hole 26 is sitting up here above the porphyry. And this is all within kind of like, mineralization. If you go from mineralization that's scattered out on the southeastern side to the northwestern side, we've got over 2 kilometers on which we've seen this mineralization that we haven't tested below this horizon, open to the northwest, open to the southeast. And all that sits within this dotted red line here, which is the ultra low resistivity anomaly from our geophysics that sits on top of this of about 3 kilometers. We still have space for this to grow. It still has space to mature. And we're very excited about what that means in terms of what we can come back and do in phase 5. Just to kind of flip back to this image and just talk a little bit about the way that we're thinking about phase 5 going forward. The next resource update that we do on this project, which will be targeted for kind of mid next year, probably H2, beginning of H2 next year, will be based on bringing as many of these higher quality tons as we can into a higher category of confidence for indicated, and obviously following up as much as we can. We think that hole 26 here is open to the north. Hole 27, which we didn't get to finish on this last program, really was drilled through a very high silica enriched environment up here, which does have some decent numbers associated with it, which you see on this slide over here, and following up on this mineralization and seeing just how much space. We do have a lot of space for it to grow into, but building that out as well. We think that then covers that payback period, shows what this would look like, on an economic basis. And while we're doing that and drilling out and upgrading all these quality tons, still showing that this is open in all directions. One thing that I was very excited about is actually following up on hole 17B over here. You can see that there's definitely some warm colors up at the top of this hole before it kind of went south out of the envelope. To me, when you see this, what we see at the top of hole 21 and 17B, I think if we drill under that, we'll see the continuation of this trend out here. This story is far from done, and we've got a lot of upgrading, exploring, and growing still to be done as we move into phase 5. And again, it's hard not to sit back and think, what else? What more? When you look at the fact that you've got this 12-kilometer long alteration halo at surface, it's lithocap environment. There are definitely going to be more of these over time. And really, like Valeriano itself has only been explored from the porphyry perspective for probably the better part of 3 years. We've done all this in 3 years and continue to move this project forward at a very exciting pace. But I think, again, like you look 10 years into the future and there'll be more of this, and this district will become a very important district in terms of exploration, development, and hopefully mining as we look to the future. This is something we've always believed in. If you take these two projects, you combine them, and this is without really factoring in too many of the opportunities that we've seen come through phase 4. These projects, they trend into this must-build box. And a lot of the work that we did at this is done at a much lower copper price environment. When you start to look at these projects at $5 copper, $2,300 gold, they look really good. And I think the future is bright for copper and for this next round of project in Chile. In terms of just talking a little bit about our balance sheets and kind of like how we got to where we are, it's no secret that we're surrounded by and funded by some very, very good shareholders that help us manage dilution, that help us out in terms of doing the right thing for the project at the right time. A good example of that was this facility that we put in place when we were trading at mid 70 cents last year in a very much more difficult market than what we see today. And being able to put a very low burden paper on this project, unsecured, that allowed us to go out, drill, study, do all the things that we need to do to get to where we are today after this transformative phase 4. We have some work to do in terms of bulking out the highlights here, but really all of this now is about moving forward with metallurgical work, moving forward with geotechnical work, continuing the work that we've been doing with the environment and the communities. We're very proud of the work our communities teams have done over the last couple of years. We're 2 years into baseline studies. We're moving all the things that we need to get this project de-risked and into kind of a more development stance of the next few years done, and it's moving along very well. In terms of our capital structure, we're sitting roughly on about $9 million in cash right now. We just appointed a new director to the board who wrote a check for us as well of $500,000. We're very excited to have Chris Beer, an investment professional with a very exciting track record and a very senior man of Bay Street, join the board and lend his assistance to us. We talked earlier about the built-in ability for us, provided we stay above $1, to finance that next step in moving towards 100%. And as we start to look towards phase 5, to be in a very good position to get through the next few months here, start those studies, get drill contractors lined up, work on our camp, and really be able to hit the ground in September, October, swinging and dancing and following up on where we left off from phase 4. Very well covered and still very short, still over $1 off our median target price. And look forward to getting back drilling again and being able to convince the group of analysts that we have supporting us that they need to raise those target prices, which I think will happen in phase 5 if we continue to be able to drill around hole 26, as well as continue to grow and strengthen that central core of that roughly 1% copper equivalent mineralization. Here the only updates here, apart from having a very strong board and maintaining Raymond, who's really built the company to where it is today, and having him stay on the board, is bringing Chris Beer into the team. Again, it was also very exciting to have him put his hand up to raise some money and to give us some proceeds to continue to advance the project with. So a very key update in addition to the team from that perspective. And we've also had Arman and Owen join us over the last little while. Arman coming from a very illustrious career over at Lundin. So him knowing the district, knowing the players, knowing the way that these projects look over time, and from 200 kilometers to north of us and coming down to join us has been very exciting to the team. Just to kind of wrap up and leave off on kind of one of the other more important things that the unsung heroes of the story are just the people working behind the scenes to make sure that we maintain social license, that we get the environmental permitting done, that we work with communities. the work that's being done on site is always very exciting to see and to see the progress, especially things like this Prepper ATEX initiative, where we're bringing people to the project, we're integrating them with the team, we're upskilling, we're training, and really just building a community around us in terms of people understanding the project, understanding what we do, how we operate, who we are, and being able to have that open communication and that engagement with them. It's really the way the projects need to be developed and going forward. And social license, at the end of the day, we are the custodian of a national asset of Chile, and the people in the environment around us all need to benefit from us doing this. So we're very excited about that. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Deb and Magda, in case there's any questions from the audience. But thank you again for this platform and opportunity to give you guys an update.
Well, thanks for the update, Ben. I don't see any audience questions. Maybe, oh no, there's one that just came in. So your recent resource estimate was based on only 30,000 meters of drilling. How did you get a mineral resource of 1.4 billion tons?
Yeah, I mean, that's very easy to answer. Again, when you sit back and you look at the amount of continuity, remember each of these holes is 200 meters apart. And each of those holes, and spans over a kilometer by kilometer each direction. And as you can see, each of those holes, once you get over 0.3 copper, is pretty much has a vertical continuity of 1,000 meters. It doesn't take a lot of these holes to add up that number. So the nice thing about a system that's this consistently mineralized and this unvariable is it's very easy to do the math on those numbers and realize that that's the potential. And so as we grow it, that potential just adds up exponentially. This is not like a gold system where you're drilling, 100,000 meters, of which only 10 meters per hole hits. We're getting half of each hole is above cutoff mineralization.
Right. I don't see any other questions.
We can just end it there. Well, thank you guys so much. If there are any other questions that pop up, we're happy to respond or anything as you guys see fit, and really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you guys and talk through this.
Yeah, for sure. If anyone wants an update or has any questions, feel free to reach out and we can have that arranged for you. And yeah, thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much. You too. Bye, guys.